All right. What's going on, Eric?
Nothing much, man. Beautiful day.
Beautiful day.
Good sun. Finally, bro. LA's been raining for the last month.
Yeah, has been. Sun's finally been out. So to introduce you a little bit, this is Erik Howe, is a really good friend of mine. We met each other through surfing, I think.
Yes.
And then
Close friends and through surfing.
and we have a bunch of mutual friends, and we surfed together in the southern tip of Mexico, Huatuco together.
Yeah.
So
Bar de la Cruz.
I know. So we definitely go way back. And then today I invited him on just because he has some experience in entrepreneurship, and he has a very unique worldview of the world, I think. And I just want to hear a little bit about everything and your perspective. Yeah.
Word. Where would you like to start?
Anywhere, man. If you want to go a little bit into your background, just introduce yourself. Or
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah. So, was born and raised in Newport Beach, California.
Mm-hmm.
Have family from Eastern descent. So my background is Pacific Islander, Asian, and Caucasian. So that's like the makeup of my ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say because I grew up in Newport Beach, I was very heavily impacted by
That culture.
the beach culture, and I'm very grateful and appreciative for the upbringing in the community that I've seen. Many people are well-to-do in the area, and so that affects the mental mindset of, how are we going to raise children, and how do we treat our community with, respect and or openness
Right.
to a certain extent.
Yeah, Newport definitely has a very specific culture, I would say.
I'd say so too.
Yeah.
It's hard to grasp.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, and obviously I grew up there, but at the same time, some of my family lives on island Hawaii, specifically
Which is completely
Oahu.
different.
Very different, right? Because here's the physical barrier that you would have on island, right? Where, you can't really go anywhere except for the local islands. And so then you have this deep appreciation for localism and or their extent of culture, community, versus Newport, which doesn't necessarily have these physical boundaries. However, I've noticed that, my close friends and or people in the community that have been there for a long time, they don't tend to go out of it once they get older because they realize how well placed and how organized it is. Newport.
Yes,
It is this metaphorical bubble.
Yes, it's great. Like a lot of kids, I was talking to someone last night actually, but he was like, I'm born and raised in Orange County and I never want to leave. I'm like, yeah, life is kind of like a book and you're staying on the first page, I mean? It's and I get the appeal. It's a great page, but some people get stuck in their ways a little bit.
I can't agree with this. I've seen it and I continue to see it, which I find really interesting because you brought up the point of perspective, and I believe perspective is gained through experience.
Yeah.
Life experience, traveling, meeting new people, breaking barriers, growing as a person.
Just novelty in general, right?
Yeah, the intricacies of life is really what gives us, our own purpose, the meaning, and who we wish to be and who we are.
Yeah. I love that, man. So since this is an entrepreneurship podcast, and usually we like to root our conversations and our guests, invitation in like their entrepreneur pursuits. So if you want to talk a little bit about that. So I know right now you're running a company called Collective Sherpa.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So at this moment, I'm the founder of a apparel company called Collective Sherpas. It's a multitude of things, but the three basics are beachwear, traditional clothing, and ravewear, and I'll dive into all three.
Yeah.
The first being like beachwear, right? So the actual articles of clothing that I currently sell are sarongs and pashminas. Sarongs being your like typical beachwear, the girls wear it around the waist, or like the guys will wear it around the head, such as myself, mostly for sun protection, but the utility of having a towel, something to lay on the beach, a little bit of coverage from the sun while also having that open, free, not too like, if you wear a t-shirt, it's kind of restraining to the extent at which it's shaped around our body. Whereas a sarong can kind of be shaped to, the user.
Yeah, it's very multi-purpose.
Yeah, very utility.
Yeah.
It's simple for sure, but it's the utility of it is very nice for the beach, which is kind of where it started for me. The journey was interesting because I found tapestry in Costa Rica, and it's just like a flea market off the street on the Sunday, and I'm with my buddies. I was living in a van at the time, and I just needed like a simple coverage. I'm wearing board shorts every day, but I want something thin, and I want to be able to wear it around me and go to the beach and have something flexible for my usage, you know, specifically it being a surfer.
Right.
And it worked well, you know, so it started to be a part of my functionality, but also my fashion. And from that point on, it kind of just like, it took off. I brought it back from Costa Rica into daily life. People saw it. It was kind of a shock at first. I'm not going to lie. I was like walking down the street in LA with board shorts on and slippers, you know, and I just come off from like, you know, the beach all day and living in a van, and I'm just wearing like open sarong, you know, like no care in the world, just cruising. And I definitely got looks, but it was really interesting to see that. So I pursued it, ended up traveling to Indonesia this last summer, living there for 2 months or so. And my uncle, he's like local there, he introduced me to a manufacturer and an artist, and in which case we brought them together, allowing for Collective Sherpas.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you do have a unique designer and a manufacturing
Correct.
background for the company.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So it's not fast fashion, which is what I really appreciate. Part of my perspective is the appreciation for handmade goods. Over time, we've been so saturated with the marketing of quick and easy. You know, get something off Amazon and you're gonna get what you see. You know. Yeah. However, I really appreciate, and I gotta see first person, like firsthand, raw, like these women, these artists sitting there and meticulously doing this whole piece of fabric, top to bottom, handmade. Really? You know, hand drawn.
Is this a Collective Sherpa?
This is a Collective Sherpa.
Okay, nice.
And comes in two. This one's silk, which is you know, the higher quality, but you know, if you really look at it, you get to see the detail and you get to feel the love. Ultimately, it's the love.
So everything's handmade.
Everything's handmade.
And the designs are uniquely designed by local artists.
By local artists.
That's crazy.
I know, it's beautiful. It
beautiful.
bogs my mind every single time I tell someone.
Yeah.
And myself.
We were talking about this right before the podcast, but I think your approach to entrepreneurship, specifically this company, is really more than just the make money or fast fashion approach. You really have something that, you know, ties close to home for you and something that you truly believe in, it sounds like, right?
Yeah. I'd definitely say that the monetary goals that are accustomed to entrepreneurship aren't necessarily my priority.
Obviously, it's part of it. I mean,
it is. It's an aspect.
Yeah.
I think that to a certain extent, it's a transfer of energy. Currency is time and effort. You know, so we'll go to work. We'll put in hours, you know, whether it be your 9 to 5 or an offline at-home job, but you're putting in time and you're putting in effort, and your result is monetary currency, which we can then trade, right? So I like really boil it down, you know. I'm kind of at this, I'm not at a high level, but at the same time, as soon as you start projecting all of these, you know, intricacies with the market, you kind of dilute what the real meaning is. And for me, it's the transfer of energy, in terms of like, all right, I'm watching someone put in all this hard work, effort, and love into whatever they're doing, and I want to appreciate that. And the way to do that is, you know, taking my currency, the thing that I've worked for, and trading it for something that they've worked for. Yeah,
that's really cool. So I want to talk a little bit about your personal perspective on things, because you know, you grew up in Newport, and that's a very sort of specific culture. But I feel like you kind of veered off from that, discovered your own path a little bit in terms of your perspective on the world, and that kind of influenced your, you know, worldview on spirituality and approach to business or whatnot. So could you tell me a little bit more about how that whole thing sort of came about, like your journey to where you are now?
Yeah.
You're your typical Newport kid to someone who's selling Collective Sherpas and huge on, you know, transfer of energy and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. The tapping in.
Yeah.
I'd like to say it like this.
Maybe it's Hawaii, maybe it's this. I don't know what the path is.
I'd say that's a really good point, by the way. Because it's very difficult for people in the, well, we have to define it as this. It's material. You know, when you become encompassed by the material that exists around us, you start to strive to gain more material. But who's to say that that's actual wealth? Wealth being knowledge, wealth being, health.
Depends on how you define wealth. Yeah,
it's a very subjective matter, and I gained insight onto what I value via traveling. When I was 18, I was kicked out from my parents' house, and so I moved to Island, had my own apartment, saved up all my money from working as a host and like going to retail. I worked in a surf shop, so I saved all this money, and I moved out to Hawaii, and being able to see how much I've been provided for and then become appreciative for that was a huge step.
Right.
Knowing that, wow, I have so much to be thankful for. And then having that personal space and time to grow was like a huge part of it, because to the extent at which I had everything that I had needed, and then now I have nothing
provided for
me.
You.
Yes, I wouldn't say I have nothing. I have insight, and I have my cognitive ability to problem solve or street smarts, all this.
But you have no more free handouts anymore from the parents,
right? Yeah. So I'm working, and I'm on island. I got my apartment, and I'm grinding in Waikiki. And
what were you doing for money? Various pursuits.
I was making by with what I could.
Yeah.
I had previously, had some connects, and if we were to get into it, it would be along the lines of bartering. I'll put it at that. It's bartering.
Okay, yeah, but the point is you figured out a way to provide for yourself. Correct. On the islands.
Yes.
And what was that experience like? Was that like
freeing?
Freeing?
Very freeing.
Because you were financially independent from your...
Yes. Yeah. Like, luckily, I'm able to say that I was providing for myself. I was able to put some food on my table. Luckily, I saved up for like a moped so I could go surfing. Wow. So I'm balancing work and life, and at the same time I'm doing online school because to the extent...
Were you in high school then? Or?
I had just graduated.
So you were doing online school for what? For college?
So for a community college.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So luckily, I was still in pursuit of an academic career.
Higher education.
Yes, exactly. To support myself, to know that there's a direction.
Right.
Because in the time that I was by myself, I'm still struggling to figure out who I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And luckily school provided enough of that support to keep me going. And from Newport, my parents as well are very academic driven. I have an older brother who also attended USC. And so knowing that, okay, I can get here, I just got to put in the effort and work,
So was USC always the goal while you were in Hawaii, or you were just trying to figure life out at that point?
USC was the goal. I applied to colleges, and I was given an opportunity to do the Trojan Transfer Program.
Okay.
And so I took that opportunity as a little golden ticket,
Kind of is, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really nice experience because at the same time COVID's happening. So I'm like, wow, I really got to utilize the time that I have to grow, be in a space which I have, freedom, but also know that I must stay disciplined and have this higher academic goal.
Right. Okay. And then when you finally got into SC, that was the time you left your journey in Hawaii, and then, right? Or...
I'd say when I got the acceptance, I was on island, and, I was stoked, and my parents were stoked. They're like, okay, they came to the realization that, okay, he can still work and be himself.
Right.
And I think tying back into the spirituality part, I was able to... Being free is ultimately what I define as spirituality. It's the relinquish of control. It's like...
From other people?
I wouldn't say people in general. I think that's a little bit umbrella term, but it's more about the relinquish of control of outside influences. People included in that, but whether that be like even Mother Nature, we can't control weather patterns to the extent that we can forecast,
right?
But we cannot control. And having, I would go on, beach trips or camping trips specifically, tying into nature. I think Aina, which is island in Hawaiian, is a really beautiful and unconditional love that I found in nature. So, for example, my buddy and I, we did like a 3-day ridge hike, right? at the time, like, I was wearing no shoes, had a backpack, a hoodie, and I was holding onto a guitar, you know?
Yeah.
So I was like bare minimum essentials, plus a little bit of music to like liven up the vibe. But
Right.
here we are, like really rooting ourselves in nature and seeing how we can push ourselves in a way in which we don't need the common utility of everyday life. Instead, we are providing for ourselves.
Right. And do you think your experience in Hawaii and just being away from control and being in nature more than usual, like the person your age would have been, influenced your worldview in a way that you are like today? Or
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that without that experience, I would be who I am now.
Right.
And to the extent at which you brought it up, right? You believe that I'm a spiritual person. I didn't tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
You believe this to be
Right.
true. You
Right.
know? So again, I can't tell you that I'm spiritual, but the fact that you believe that to be true, I can definitely attest this to the experiences that I've had.
Right. Well, I would just say definitely because of your unique experiences, not a lot of people live out by themselves in Hawaii, you know, at the age of 18, 19, right?
Yeah.
So that unique experience itself definitely influenced you in a unique way, and I think it ties into a lot of the way you probably view the world today.
Yeah.
Your approach to like the business and everything. Not everyone's thinking about handmade goods and local artists. You know, that's not saying not everyone doesn't, but
Maybe not be
does.
someone's priority.
Not everyone's priority, right? So, and I think you have a pretty, like, you like to go to raves and you like to go to these things where you're, you know, the kind of one of the main goals is to connect with other people on a deeper level than you usually would from school or the workplace or whatnot.
Yes.
You would say, right? So
Would you say like, well, deeper is interesting because
it's different.
Yeah.
Different for sure.
What do you think deep connections are?
I thought about this a little. I think deep means probably like being more genuine, because like in society, like certain workplaces or settings, you're forced to put on like a social face, or you know, and then certain communities, maybe like a rave or something, people feel more open to letting down the guards or the faces they portray. That's just something I'm thinking about.
Well, I think both sides. Let's go into like professional and non-professional.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the rave culture is interesting because I had a conversation with my buddy about this, and you get to see people in their highs and lows. You get to see people in their own journey, in their experience, and there's people all around you, but there's the person to your left who could be having the time of their life, and the person to the right who's just coming off, you know, whatever experience that they're having. You know, they may be on a come down of some sorts, and you have the choice to reach out to both. You know, whether they're having, you know, they're like in the experience and they're trying to make the best of it, or you can clearly tell someone who's going absolutely crazy, just cruising, partying. You know, their aura, their energy is just unbelievably bright. And so to the extent at which you can have deep connections is, you know, you can give a hug to the person on your right and help them out. And then you can also, you know, party with the person to your left and raise each other's energy, you know? So I'd say the connections are inevitably becoming deeper. They become deeper because you have the ability to see people in their highs and their lows, which is a very interesting perspective and, you know, experience, because that's when we create the deepest connections with people around us. Are, wow, we just saw this crazy artist, you know, and the music was great, the vibes were great, you know, all my friends were there and I gotta be there, you know. And then at the same time it's like, wow, you unwind after the event and you're still with the same people and you're like, holy crap, like we just went through it for like 6 hours, just, you know, letting the body move, you know. And then you get to spend that time, you know, after this release of serotonin and dopamine, and you get to sit there with the person across the table from you who you previously just saw dancing their heart away, you know. And so I think those connections can be deep in the non-professional world, whereas if you meet someone in a professional world, so let's say, you know, for marketing and Marshall, you see someone on their hustle and you can respect that. there's the degree of respect where, okay, I'm hustling and he hustling, so there's the connection there. To the extent at which it's deep is up to how much you're vulnerable.
Yeah, so you're saying it's not that black and white to say one setting you get deeper to someone. It's just a different way of connecting.
Yeah.
Right? And you see different sides of people, perhaps.
Yes, for sure.
Interesting. So a point I want to talk about, we've talked about this before, I think even on our surf trip or something, I can't remember, but it relates to like kind of what you're studying right now in school and what you want to do for the long term. I know you have some pretty interesting takes about kind of where the future direction of the mental health like treatment space is going and kind of how you see yourself being involved with that.
Yeah. So I just want to say this first off is I'm a huge advocate for psychedelics.
Okay.
Part of that is the rave culture. Part of that is the introspective nature of psychedelics themselves. Mm-hmm. And I believe that over the time that we've seen it, or the time that I've seen it, it's been going on for, millennia, like centuries. Like
what? The use of psychedelics? Okay.
Yeah, it's been dated back to Mesopotamia and even the Aztecs. Aztecs also they have like sculptures of mushrooms, like very vividly around temples, and they're preserved very well, mm-hmm. which leads us to believe that they were not idolized, but recognized for their power. Power being self-empowerment, what it means to be an individual in the collective, and how we can attribute that to being a community and providing love for one another. And so to the part at which I think that there's so much room to grow, we're at the point where technology and consciousness are starting to overlap, right? AI, specifically, but mm-hmm. to the extent at which we are now having fundamental truths arise from experiences such as psychedelics. Again, I said I'm personally an advocate, and I've seen a lot of growth from myself and the people around me who've experienced such impactful moments, one with people they care about and with themselves, which are two huge parts of the growing process. Mm-hmm. And to the extent at which it has viability as an industry, mm-hmm. right? Okay, like for example, let's talk about cannabis. Cannabis is now in the process of becoming federally legalized mm-hmm. after a long duration of it being criminalized, being an FDA Schedule I drug.
Yeah.
And, states such as California can now legally sell it in the state of California, but U.S. as a whole is like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
So there's this conflict, right? And I think that cannabis is a psychedelic. However, there are more powerful psychedelics that are becoming more, I wouldn't even say mainstream, it's more accessible.
Yeah.
And so with accessibility, just like, during Woodstock and the 80s and 90s, accessibility comes openness. And you see this transition of mindset ultimately. And
there's a whole cultural movement.
There's a whole culture. And I think rave is definitely part of that.
Yeah.
And like what you're saying as an entrepreneur, how does this tie in to the future? Mm-hmm. I'd like to see more psychoactive therapy, and I'd like to see people getting help for mental illnesses because it's an all organic nature. It's nature at its core, you know, and the complexities that we get to, consume and ingest and experience such an impactful, how do I say this? Such an impactful, not even chemical, but experience,
mm-hmm. That's a good word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I think the industry has a lot of room to grow, and I'd like to see it go into the more medical, discipline where people have the ability to use it, either in nature or in a controlled setting where they're around people that they can talk to. And it's starting to come out. Like, Netflix did a series on how to change your mind, and it covers a lot of the a lot of the available substances such as shrooms, LSD, MDMA, and what was the last one? Those are like the three main ones. So, to the extent at which people can find them and use them is now becoming openly more available, which I encourage because, just because the government tells you something doesn't mean that it's necessarily right or wrong, It's hard to tell, right?
Yeah.
Hard to tell, but the goal is security. Government ultimately is the balance of freedom and security.
Mm-hmm.
How well can a nation be secure if everyone wants to be free, and how secure can it be if everyone can do what they want?
Yeah.
So there has to be some sort of guidelines, but I'm an activist, but I'm also gonna be in the entrepreneurial space to get these to the people that need them.
Yeah.
In the medical, the pharmaceutical, people. My mom's a doctor, so
Yeah.
I would love to see clinical studies coming out about the impact,
Right.
whether it be like positive or non-positive. I want to see what's out there because I've seen a lot of it, and to be honest, 95 to 98% of it's amazing.
Right.
The other like 2% to 5% is like good to like learn and adjust, but for the most part, like hugely empowering for the person, the individual,
Mm-hmm.
to like know that they're a part of a collective.
Yeah.
That's huge. Who doesn't want to be a part of a community?
Right. Do you see any downsides to the use of psychedelics, or you obviously claim to be an activist, right? But just to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah. I'd say that how I see it is that there's risk versus reward.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically with dosages, there's a dose called the hero's journey, which applies to shrooms, and it's 5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, and there's the stereotype that you'll break through meaning what ends up happening in a psychedelic experience, specifically with shrooms, is the term called ego dissolution, which breaks the barrier between the ego and the id,
Mm-hmm.
and allows for synapses to fire, not particularly pertaining to the ego, which is specifically consciousness and how we view ourselves appearance-wise and our outward projection, specifically in the physical, and your id being the authentic self, your truest intentions. So it allows you to break down these barriers that hold the two apart and allow you to have clarity on things that you need to see, not necessarily want to see. So to the degree that if someone wanted to take a large dose just for the shits and gigs, they're just like, I want to see something, I want to see things, I want to have visuals, I want butterflies to be in the room. There's the tool versus toy and the risk versus reward. Like, how are you using it? What's the set? What's the setting?
Right.
And why are you doing this ultimately?
Mm-hmm.
And for clinical reasons, I've done a lot of research, and it's very beneficial for someone that is going through PTSD and or has traumatic events in their life that they have to live through every day in their subconscious, and their id, their authentic self, has experienced this, but their ego kind of pushes it down so it's not surfacing, but when you're in the psychedelic experience, it surfaces, and it can be very emotional for people,
Mm-hmm.
like I, for one, have felt like a great deal of emotion. Like, there'll be times where I'm in the experience and I will have such overwhelming joy of, wow, life is beautiful. I can't imagine like not being in this experience with the people I've met, with my family, nature as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposite being like, wow, I've also seen some really gnarly things, whether it be death or loss of a family member, and being able to compartmentalize those emotions that are tied to your experience are very impactful. Having time and space within your own consciousness to develop a further understanding of self ultimately is huge.
Mm-hmm.
No antidepressant is going to do that. I personally, I don't have any antidepressants. I've never taken them before, but I've, had friends that, need to take, Adderall, for example, not necessarily an antidepressant, but something to stimulate the mind. And their experience is not as impactful as it is just problem solving. They have an issue that they may or may not want to go deeper into, but, to solve a quick fix, they'll take some Adderall and call it a day and try to get some homework done. But they're not getting mental clarity, which is ultimately what I am an advocate for.
Which psychedelic can be a huge help for, right?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
I believe so. I think mental clarity has been misconstrued through the generations. And, I'm seeing it now, to be honest, where people are getting a grasp at who they are, why they're doing things, and what they're doing, who they are, what they're doing, and why they're doing it. Ultimately, purpose, purpose-driven people. I believe you've met one of my friends as well, Brian.
Yeah,
he is, oh my God, just a beautiful human being. He just emits such good energy wherever he goes, and you can tell that people care and love for him, and vice versa. He loves and cares for the people around him, and that type of perspective is finally being appreciated. For a while it was more bottlenecked into this, hippie movement, which I can say is neither good nor bad. It just is.
Yeah.
But it's that mental clarity where now we have the tools to medicate, but also marginalize. Like everything best is in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to take, like back in the 80s, 90s, they take in like 50 tabs, which is very taxing.
Was it legal at the time? Or?
No, like completely illegal, but like very taxing on the mental.
Yeah.
So you're not gaining insight. You're just filling your brain with serotonin and dopamine and stimulating it to the extent at which, wow, after the experience, I have so much that I've need to process that you're not clear anymore. Now you have this densely compacted experience, and now you have to like slowly pick away parts while you also are striving to add more in. And so it doesn't create clarity. In fact, it just creates congestion.
Gotcha. So even though you're an advocate, you also advocate for specific ways of using it that are beneficial.
Yes.
For the mind and, achieving insight.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it really boils down to the mind, the body, and the soul. There's three things. I like to simplify things.
Yeah.
Because the more we try to add detail, we're getting away from the bigger picture, which is well-being. Okay. Right? The mental aspect being how can you process and problem solve around you. The body being how well can you be active, eat well, train well, go to the gym, exercise, and the soul being tapping into something that for example, like a higher purpose, this complexity of the universe that we exist in and perceive, but cannot comprehend to the extent that which we can explain. It just is, we just live in a world that is. And in this moment, it's uniquely one of one. And we have to appreciate those moments, this moment.
Yeah.
This moment now. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And having...
One of one.
Yeah, one of one, man.
Yeah.
That's how I like to describe each and every moment, especially when you meet people that also appreciate the uniqueness and the complexities that come with each and every moment.
Yeah.
And I believe that ties into everything, right? When you get space and time to appreciate the things around you, that's spirituality. That's letting go and relinquishing the control of the environment around you and just letting it be, Yeah. Like you cannot tell a tree to grow, it just grows. You not tell a bird to fly, it just flies.
Yeah.
And same thing for us, like we will grow, but to the extent we cannot tell each person what is best for them.
Yeah. Gosh, that's great.
Yeah.
I would love to keep on going forever, but I don't know how long this camera will last. But to kind of summarize, is there anything in particular that you want the listeners to take away with? And is there anything that you see yourself?
Do I see myself?
Where do you see yourself in the future, like with Collective Sherpa, or perhaps like post-graduation, you want to be involved with psychedelics in a more professional way? Like, what are sort of the, the future path you see for yourself, and like some takeaways you want people to have from this conversation?
Yeah. Good question. I'd say in terms of projection, meaning future, definitely, this is what I tell people is information is now very valuable. So being informed is very valuable. So having those that have gone through the experience, finding ways in which they can describe those experiences and give insight to those that have not, that's the direction where I think it can be very positive. For example, psychoactive therapy, being with psychiatrically trained doctors or medical field, having them being informed.
So you're potentially interested in being a psychiatrist?
Not necessarily a psychiatrist.
But someone like involved in the mental health space, perhaps, and being an advocate for psychedelics.
Yes. Psychedelics, I think psychedelics will end up being just an aspect of where I wish to be, but definitely being involved. I would like to be involved going forward.
Cool. And then Collective Sherpas?
Collective Sherpas, that is going to be a platform for the outlet of authenticity.
Okay.
Whether like specifically handmade goods.
Yeah.
Part of what I'd like to do is keep traveling and from my travels bring back goods and cultures, goods from cultures that have meaningful impact into the love and the effort that they've been provided for and the handed down nature of tradition.
Perfect. All right. Any last words?
Last words.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is 3 things. Is the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and the journey to the top of the mountain has a million ways to get to the top. And while you're on the path, it's about the path and the pace.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, Stephen Shee,
bro.
That
was great.
It was an honor.
We'll have to have you back sometime.
Thank you, brother.
The camera's not like this.
Will do.
Alrighty.
All right, y'all. Have a good one.